Padded bottom, padded bottom. They rang the dinner bell early that evening, the kind of dull metal clang that lives in your teeth afterward. It was chicken and a scoop of mashed potatoes shaped like a half snowball, gravy like a bruise. We lined up in our gray robes and shuffled into the dining hall while the green lights flickered, a bad ballast, the electrician said, and the long windows took on a greasy reflection of us all, as if the asylum wanted to memorize our faces the way a bully memorizes your weak spots. I sat third table from the door, same place I always sat. Routine mattered in there. Change was the enemy. If they moved your seat, even 2 chairs down, your day could slide sideways and never stand straight again. I kept my spoon on the napkin and my hands flat on the table, left thumb pressing down the corner of the napkin to keep it from lifting in the draft. I didn't like when things fluttered. That was when Harlon Veetch came in, tapping his stick the way some men twirl a mustache. Tap, tap, tap against his palm. He was the night guard most nights, but liked to show up early, cut through the end of day shift like a man shouldering through a parade he didn't get invited to. Big man. Knew he was big, too, which made it worse. His uniform ran tight at the buttons, and his cap was tilted like the cap itself was trying to slide off and get away from him. He looked at us like we were windows, with streaks he couldn't scrub out. "Eat your supper, gentlemen," Veetch said, drawing the word gentleman out like a joke only he was in on. "It's a long night for me, if it's a long night for you." Malenko Duncan was across from me, 2 seats down. Small man, I always thought if you put him in a closet, he could turn sideways and vanish into the grain lines. He kept a little comb in his shirt pocket, the cheap black kind they hand out at the barber shop. He wasn't supposed to have it, but nobody ever found it on room checks, like the comb slipped into the cracks the way he did. He combed the air in front of him, slow strokes that caught on nothing, and murmured words only he could see. "Hamburger and coat," he said again and again, like counting beads. "Hamburger and coat, hamburger and coat." That was from a story I'd heard, stale bread of a story told so many times no one remembered who baked it first, about the day he came in, years back, still smelling like a train and a bad night. He'd stuffed a hamburger into the inside pocket of his winter coat, kept it there until it rotted, wouldn't let it go. They say he called it his ration. They say he'd been at the Argonne in the First War, and it burned something out of him, or burned something in. One man's mind is a house, but not all houses are built to take fire. "Eyes forward," Veetch said, and his stick tapped my table, bounced off my spoon. "Eat." We ate. Duncan lifted his spoon and set it down. He was always careful on the first bite, like he was trying to remember which end to use. I was watching him when I should have been watching my plate, because that's when Veetch moved, quick for a big man, and brought the stick down across Duncan's knuckles. Crack! The sound had a second sound inside it, like breaking a stick inside your own mouth. Duncan hissed but didn't shout. He pulled his hand to his chest and cradled it. "Hands on the table," Veetch said. "Rule's the rule." "He didn't do any—" someone started, and then shut up. "You learned to shut up." Veetch set the stick across Duncan's bowl and leaned close, breath hot and onion sour. "You keep saying that nonsense, Duncan Donut. Hamburger coat. What kind of soldier talks like that, huh? Oh, right. You weren't a soldier. You were the stick they propped under the tent, the extra boots they never laced. You were just there while men did work." Duncan stared at his hands. His lips moved. The words were there. I could see them stepping out one at a time, like rabbits onto snow, but no sound. "You hear me?" Veetch said. He looked to the rest of us, smiled without teeth. "Duncan doesn't hear so good. Maybe a nap will help him hear better." He seized Duncan by the sleeve and hauled him up. The chair legs squealed on the linoleum, a kicked dog sound. Duncan stumbled, tried to set his feet, failed. His right shoe turned inward when he walked and made a tiny whispering squeak. Flat feet, they called it in the intake notes. I don't think Veetch had ever read those notes, but you got the feeling he could smell the flatness on a man, the short falling of arches, the way bones make their own weather. "Back in your padded palace?" Veetch said. "Your Highness." He marched Duncan out past the food tray window, where the cooks pretended to look at their shoes. The door thumped shut behind them. A moment later, the smaller thump of the padded room door, which didn't have a window and barely had a knob. Just a big dumb circle of a thing like a toy. I looked down at my plate. The gravy had congealed where it pooled against the potatoes, cold skin forming. Someone farted. Someone laughed. Someone whispered a prayer. The green light buzzed and then went steady. We ate. What else were we supposed to do? Nights in that place stretched like chewed gum. You could hear them pull thin. They made a sound most people would miss, a whispery hum rising from the vents just before midnight, like the building itself cleared its throat. Then the after-hours stuff started, the squeak and squeal of carts, the low talk from the nurse's station, the occasional clink of a glass vial like a distant wind chime. I didn't sleep much. There was a chair in the corner of my room that had been there before I came. The cushion had a dent in it, like a ghost had sat down and never stood up. Sometimes I stared at the dent and wondered who it belonged to. Sometimes I imagined getting up and putting my hand on that place, feeling the shape, but I never did. Around 1 a.m. I went to the bathroom. The hall had that polished smell of cheap floor wax, and the walls were the color of old teeth. As I came back, I saw a figure slumped in the little square of window set in the padded room door, cheek to the glass, breath fogging. Veetch. He'd pulled the observation chair close and planted it, his legs splayed out like roots, stick resting across his knees. His cap had slid sideways the way it always tried to. He was snoring, a wet little piggy snore, and every third breath it rattled like a nail in a tin can. You don't wake a sleeping guard, not unless you want the kind of trouble that can't be washed off. I was about to keep going when I heard it, a voice low and steady, rising from the crack where door meets jamb, which is all the gap a padded room is willing to give. "Padded bottom," the voice said. "Padded bottom." It was Duncan, of course, and he said it without any heat, without the pleasure of revenge. He said it like you'd say window looking at a window, or rain at the sound on a roof. A simple, solid, true thing. I don't know why it hurt as much as it did. Veetch stirred. His snore paused. He didn't wake. He simply let his head drop a little more. The cap slid. If it had a face, it might have looked relieved. "Padded bottom," Duncan whispered. "Padded bottom." I stood and listened until my heart started to press on my ribs with both hands. Then I went to my room and sat on the bed and kept sitting. Sleep came in on a rope and left before I could grab it. Some places grow a mean crop of coincidence. You don't see that until you've been there a while, and then it's the only thing you see. Guys relapse on the same dates year to year, like the calendar had teeth. A nurse's watch stops every time she walks past the boiler room. We prove it by swapping watches, and still it's her. A certain caw of crows means somebody's going to try the window latches. There's no reason why, but you start looking up when you hear that sound. So when Veetch nodded off in front of Duncan's door again the next night, and the next, and the night after, and every time the same phrase slid under the door like smoke, padded bottom, I wasn't surprised. We were all waiting to see what kind of crop would grow from that phrase. You could feel it under the soles of your feet when you walked the long hall. an itch in the tile. He still picked on Duncan during the days, still rapped his knuckles and told him he wasn't a real soldier, just a coat rack with a hamburger rotting in the pocket to keep him company. One time, by the laundry chute, I heard him talking to another guard about his own feet, which turned inward just a little, not a lot. Not enough to keep him out of the war, not then, not anymore. Only the first war had kept him out. Doctor said my arches were shot, Veetch said, his voice flat as a hand. 4F, I could have gone. I would have gone. He spat into the corner like he was aiming at a memory. Fools got lucky. He said fools the way some men say saints. He hated them because they were blessed. I tried not to think about him, not because he scared me, that too, but because thinking about him made me feel itchy on the inside, a place you can't scratch with fingers. Cruel men are simple creatures. They pull a lever and enjoy whatever noise the machine makes. It's the machine that's complicated, and this place was nothing if not a machine. One afternoon, 2 weeks into this new ritual, they sat us in the day room to watch a reel of instruction about fire safety. The film was older than our building and narrated by a man who had learned how to talk into microphones the way farmers learn how to talk to cows. Slow, steady, hopeful. Veetch stood by the switch, bored. When the reel jammed and split the picture into double men with double hats, he slapped the projector, then slapped the boy who'd loaded it, a tall kid who didn't last a month. He didn't use the stick on staff, only hands. I wondered if that counted as kindness. Later, when the reel was rewound and they let us shuffle back to our rooms for the pre-dinner wash-up, I felt something under my heel in the corridor, a little puff, like walking on bread. I pressed, and it pressed back. The floor rose and fell, not much, barely enough to taste through my shoe, but enough to knock the balance of my stride sideways. I looked up. The corridor's paint had bubbled in places, small blisters like a school of fish rising, and a gentle sigh came from inside the walls, soft and private. The kind you make when you sit, finally, after standing all day. The building was settling, the doctors would say. Old timbers, old pipes. Buildings breathe. I thought of the padded rooms, those soft cubes where the walls made kindness look like a trap, the tiny seams where the panels met like stitched lips. They were meant to absorb a person the way a mother absorbs a crying child. Take the noise and heat and have it matter less after a while. But I had the feeling lately that our padded rooms had learned another trick. At dinner, I sat third table from the door. Veetch did his parade, stick-tapping his palm. The chicken was mostly bone, but the potatoes came out warm this time, gravy loose. My thumb pressed my napkin. The room hummed. Duncan said, "Hamburger and coat." Veetch's stick came down, not on Duncan's hand this time. On the back of his head, a hard whack meant to be halfway pretend, so the nurses wouldn't write it up as anything more than accident. Duncan's face pitched forward into his plate. The gravy took his nose like a finger. He breathed in and coughed, and Veetch, laughing, yanked him backward by the collar. A little string of potato glued itself to the side of Duncan's mouth and hung there like a worm. Something in the floor shifted. We all felt it, a small, polite nudge, as if someone had touched the underside of the building with one finger. The ceiling lights hiccuped. The sound of forks stopped for a beat and then started again, because hunger makes the rules around here. Veetch hauled Duncan upright. "Dinner's over for the soldier," he said. "Nap time." He marched Duncan toward the door. As he went, the coat Duncan wore, thin as faith, brushed my arm. It was the kind of scratchy that wakes you up from thinking. He smelled like laundry soap and something else sweet rot, old apple maybe. He didn't look at me. His eyes were on some middle distance, and he was talking to it in that same soft tone he used with the comb. "Hamburger and coat," he said. Padded bottom. Padded. Veetch swung the door wide, fed him into the hall like you'd feed a sheet into a mangle. After they'd gone, I looked at my spoon. The reflection showed my face in a funhouse curve, nose canoeing long. I set the spoon down and did not pick it up again. That night, I waited. Sometimes you know a thing is going to happen. You don't know what shape it'll wear or what voice it'll borrow, but you feel the pressure behind it, the way water presses behind a dam, the way words press behind a man's teeth when he tries to be good. The hall's midnight hum came soft and late. I counted 60 after the hum and stepped out. The floor's little bread puff had moved. Now it was 2 puffs, one after the other, as if a thing with soft feet had taken 2 steps under the tiles. I passed the nurse's station, the glass blurring their lamplight into a smear. A magazine lay open to a perfume ad. A woman smiled in trapezoid. Veetch was at the padded room door, head turned sideways in sleep. His mouth hung open just enough to show a crease of tongue, like a slug you wish you hadn't seen. The stick lay across his lap. His fingers were closed around it, but loosely, the way a boy might hold a stick he's pretended is a sword all day. I stepped close, quiet. Inside the room, it was very dim. The electric nightlight they'd mounted high in the corner was whiter than day, somehow, and yet it made everything feel farther away. I could not see Duncan, only the soft bulges of the padded walls, their seams, their fat swallow of corners, but I could hear him. "Padded bottom," he said. The words rolled slow and sure. "Padded bottom. Padded." Veetch stirred. The stick rolled, then stopped. His hand closed around emptier air and twitched. In the padded room, the phrase changed. The padded stayed. The bottom came apart and came back together. "Pad dead bot, Tom," Duncan said. "Pad dead bottom." The walls breathed. I swear it. Their seams opened and shut, tiny, like the mouths of baby birds. In the corner, the nightlight sharpened and the angle of shadow crept down the wall inch by inch, the way one finger creeps toward another when you're daring yourself to touch something hot. Veetch made a little sound, not quite a word, and I realized he had slid forward in his chair bit by bit as if the door had developed gravity. His cheek squashed against the glass. His breath fogged a circle. The fog cleared, fogged again. "Padded bottom," the room said. "Stop," I whispered, without deciding who I meant. Maybe the room, maybe Duncan, maybe something that had woken up with us and was now standing, stretching, enjoying its joints. I waited there until my knees locked. When I finally limped back to my bed, the dent in the cushion looked deeper. The next day, something changed in Veetch's walk. It was small. If you didn't live on crumbs, you wouldn't have noticed, but it was there. He rolled his feet more, as if he'd been given shoes a half size too large, and when he stood still, his toes turned in toward each other like a pair of old drunks conspiring. He snapped at us more. He snapped at the other guards less. He ate an apple, and the way he bit it felt like watching a dog bite a stick. Too much, too fast, a chewing that wanted to be breaking. He laughed at something Nurse Eleanor said, and then flushed scarlet, anger rushing in to hide the shame. If you've lived on a ward, you get to know that expression, anger masquerading as dignity. He clicked the stick on his palm, 3 short taps. You could almost hear the echo, padded bottom, in the hollow space those taps left behind. That afternoon, they took Duncan to the clinic to look at his knuckles, which had gone colors. He returned with white tape like a bandage ring. Veetch smirked at the tape, and then winced, as if the smirk pinched him somewhere he had no name for. At dinner, the potatoes were cold again. Duncan sat across from me with his taped hands and his small, careful sips of milk. Veetch ranged the aisle and stopped behind him, a big shadow with a stick-shaped finger held to his lips to suggest quiet. But his other hand had developed a tremor. I saw it in the rattle of the stick tip against his trouser seam. He lifted the stick to tap it against the edge of Duncan's bowl, and his wrist twitched, and the stick dropped into the potatoes with a soft, obscene plop. A beat. Nobody breathed. Then someone at the far table let out a laugh they couldn't hold in, and then they held it in too hard, and it came out their nose as a pig's sound snort. Veetch swung around toward the sound, face bloodflower bright. He wanted to hit the laugher and knew he couldn't. He wanted to hit Duncan, the old reliable target, and found his hand wouldn't lift right. He left the stick in the potatoes. The dining hall changed temperature, only a degree or two, but I felt it on the inside of my wrists, where the skin is thinnest. I pressed my thumb on my napkin. It didn't help. Nothing helps when the room decides to make up its mind. Veetch collected himself and reached for the stick. His fingers sank into the potatoes and then kept sinking. He pulled back with a curse. His right hand came away coated, stringy gravy dribbling off his pinky in a translucent ribbon. Someone giggled. The giggle was contagious. The giggle was a sickness. You had to swallow it fast, or it would run your whole body. Veetch stepped back, stick retrieved, potatoes clinging, and then the floor made that small, polite nudge. He stumbled. The stick banged his shin. He bit off a shout and turned it into a grin so bright and dead you could have used it to light the hallway if the power blew. "Eat your supper," he said. "Enjoy it while it's hot." He limped out with the stick dragging. The potatoes, what was left on it, left a smear on the floor that looked, if you were inclined to see it, like a handprint sliding away. That night there was no snore at the padded room door. Not because Veetch didn't sleep. He slept, all right, but it was a sleep with no sound except the tiny flurry of his breath, as if he were trying to sneak past his own ears. The door's window showed the black of his coat. The cap had fallen into his lap, brim cracked. Inside, Duncan's voice did not start right away. I waited a long time, counting the seconds to keep panic from knitting me a sweater. Then the voice came, not from the floor this time, not from the seams, but from the center of the room. Imagine a room with a throat. "Padded bottom," it said. "Padded bottom." Veetch shifted in his chair. One of his boots, polished hard enough to kindergarten a boy's reflection in, slid forward across the tile. He wasn't falling, he was following. I could see it plain as the nicks on his stick. He was sliding forward, half an inch at a time, the way a man in a dream walks toward a woman he's not supposed to love, and the dream makes him do it anyway. One slow motion, step after another. The door gave a little, not open. Padded room doors don't do open by themselves, but a little. The big dumb circle of a knob turned a quarter turn and then another quarter turn, as if someone on the other side had finally learned how round things work. The latch tongue tucked itself back into the door with a meek little, "I'm sorry." The building breathed. The hall lights dimmed as if someone had leaned on the switch. Veetch slid across the threshold without standing. I swear that's how it happened. He never rose. The room invited him, and he rolled like a coin. The door closed behind him with a sound so gentle it cut me. Then the bolt snicked. For a second I thought of yelling. For a smaller second I thought of running to the nurse's station and pounding the glass. But you learn in a place like that, in a place like ours, that sometimes yelling is the same as starting a small fire in a dry field. It doesn't warm you, it burns you from the outside in. I stood with my fist in my shirt pocket like that might anchor it there. From inside came a sound, a sigh made of canvas and cotton batting. A mother's lap settling, a heavy man leaning back into a soft chair he has mocked all his life. "Padded bottom," the room said. But this time, the room wasn't saying room, and it wasn't saying Veetch. It was saying truth. Simple as hubcap, simple as thumb. There were other sounds. Veetch's voice, surprised. A shuffle, the kind of scuffle feet make when they want to go one way and the floor is determined they will go another. I heard something soften the way bread softens under gravy. And then nothing at all for a long time, until the long time itself turned into a sound, a deep, satisfied breathed by walls. When morning came, they found him asleep on the floor, arms tucked under his chest, face to the padding. The bolt was thrown, and the door had its dumb round face on, same as ever. They woke him, and he woke slow. He couldn't turn his hands palm up right away. They had to massage his fingers one by one, until they remembered how to be fingers. Locked himself in, Nurse Eleanor said, and the other guards laughed the way boys laugh when a coach drops a whistle down his shirt. Veetch smiled and said he'd gotten dizzy and sat down, and the door must have swung behind him. He said it like there was no reason in the world for anything that happens to anyone, ever. He said it like he'd found a new faith overnight, and it had no name. He still carried the stick, but I never saw him hit Duncan again. Oh, he tapped the table near his tray or smacked the doorframe going out, trying to make the right noises so no one would guess. But the stick was a prop now, a plank in a school play that says pirate ship. His walk, though, his walk was different. His feet had turned in more. He couldn't stop it, and he couldn't throw it off by turning them outward either, which only made him look like he was curtsying. After a week of that, he turned them in and let them be. Some men give in to the world the way a fence gives in to ivy. It takes time, but it takes. I kept to my routines. Third table from the door, thumb on the napkin, spoon on the left side now. A new rule I gave myself because the old rules had gotten used and tired rules break when you lean on them. Duncan kept combing the air. He didn't say hamburger and coat as much. He tried new words on his tongue the way you try a suit jacket, rolling your shoulders and listening for seams. But at night, from a padded room, always the same line, even if in a whisper so thin you could lose it in your sleeve if you weren't careful. "Padded bottom," he said, and sometimes, right after, like a man thanking someone who has finally understood him, "There you go." A month later, a storm rolled in off the river and sat on our roof, gray and stubborn. The lights went out at noon and stayed out until after supper. We ate cold sandwiches, bologna, sometimes when the budgets were bad, and drank milk warm from the back of the cart. The halls sang wind songs. Somewhere a pane of glass cracked spiderweb style, and the crack drew a sort of map I could read if I squinted. I went to the door of the padded room because where else do you go when the sky makes you small? No one was in the chair, no cap on the floor, no stick. Duncan stood in the middle of the room, hands folded. The nightlight had no power, and yet the corners were lit the way corners get lit in rooms that have decided to be kind for an hour. He turned his head like he'd felt my eyes and smiled a little, the kind of smile a man makes when he finds a penny face up, not because a penny matters, but because it's nice to be told yes. Through the crack of the door, someone had left it on the latch, or the latch had decided it had worked enough for one day. I heard him say it. Not to me, not to anyone. To the walls, maybe. To the floor that breathes. To a big man with mean eyes and heavy hands who had found, now, a better way to rest. "Padded bottom," he said. "Padded bottom." The walls shivered, pleased. I left the door the way I found it and went back to my room. The chair in the corner looked like a place a body could sit and be forgiven, just for a little while. I put my hand on the dent and pressed until the shape warmed to meet me. Then I sat. I didn't sleep. I rested the way a small bird rests, whole body full of air and noise, heart pattering. The storm talked, and the pipes answered, and I listened. And when I got up after however long and lay down on my bed, the sheets felt like bread dough beneath my palms. I sank, and the bed held me, and I didn't mind it. They say a man is a house. I think a house is a man, too. I think it learns us, if we stay long enough, learns where to press and where to let go, and who needs the soft rooms and who needs the hard ones. I think sometimes it sands the corners off your fear so you can fit into whatever part of yourself is left. Next day, Veetch came in late. He didn't whistle or tap the stick. The stick wasn't there. He walked like someone had taught his feet a new alphabet overnight, and he was enjoying sounding his way through it, unembarrassed by the mistakes. He collected trays with both hands and said thank you to the cook through the window, and the cook looked bewildered, as if his spoons had started saying please to him. He didn't look at Duncan. Duncan didn't look at him, and when the door swung open after dinner, and I heard that phrase from far down the hall, padded bottom, it had no malice left in it. It sounded like a label you put on a thing so it knows it belongs somewhere. It sounded like rest. If you want some moral, some bright string to tie all this to your wrist, I don't own one. Maybe there's one like those bracelets they hand out that say, "What would somebody do?" And maybe it's made of elastic, so you don't feel it cut off the blood to your hand. All I can say is this. In a building where the lights hum and the floors breathe and the padded rooms learn your name, you don't throw a man through a soft door and laugh. The softness pays out what goes in, and if you fall asleep near the door long enough, the room learns your weight, learns your smell, learns your heavy breath like a lullaby. One night it will invite you in without opening. You will accept without standing, and afterward you will walk differently, because the floor will have taught your feet how to be what they already were. Sometimes at dinner, third table from the door, I press my thumb to the napkin and feel the table press back, gentle, like a hand on a child's head. I eat what's warm. I drink what's there. I keep my spoon where I can see it. I listen. When the words come, padded bottom, they're not the sound of mockery anymore. They're the sound of a place telling one of its own to lie down and be still and let some other, kinder weight hold him for a while. I try my best to do what I'm told.